Today I'm going to be finishing up the rest of Chapter 5 and moving on to Chapter 6. And for those of you guys that are keeping track of what's going to be coming up on our next exam, which is not this Thursday, but the next Thursday, you're going to have part of Chapter 3, the end part of Chapter 3, the beginning of Chapter 4, and then you'll have 5 and 6 on this exam. So 2 half chapters of 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. So if you haven't caught up with your reading, make sure that you are doing that, because that is coming up very, very soon. We do need to have a little bit of a frank discussion about the participation in this class and the assignments that you're doing for this class. I know that you guys are all wonderful people, and I do genuinely believe that, but we're here to do something, and that is to make you more scientifically literate. And in order for you to do that, you have to be following the directions, you have to be giving me what I'm asking you to give me, and be earning your grades. And so this is the part of class where I have to kind of talk to you about if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to get the points for the Thursday assignments. This isn't going to apply to everybody, but this is going to apply to certain people, which I'm guessing the people that aren't here, probably this is what applies to them. If you find that the directions that I am writing for you are longer than your notes, then there is probably something wrong with your notes. If you didn't answer all the parts of the question, like if I ask you a question that has 4 parts, if you don't go through and answer all 4 parts, that isn't giving me what I'm asking for. If I can't tell that you watched the whole video because you only have a couple of lines from the very first part of the video, if your notes wouldn't help you in studying for the test, like if I were to give you a test over that video that we just watched, how many of you could go back and look at your notes and know that you would be ready to take a test about that video from what you did? If you are giving me things that are incomplete, if you're not checking for spelling, if these notes look like they were written by your 3rd grade sister, if you are wasting my time and generally giving me BS, then there's really no point in even turning it in. I do look at everybody's notes, and I do notice when you upload things and they don't have anything written on them. It's not like you're mysteriously going to get a grade for not doing anything but re-uploading the notes file that I gave you. So consider this the 6-week warning. We've done this 4 times already. Now is the time to start having it done right. Going through and making sure you're following every single one of the directions. If you're not following the directions at this point, then you're not going to get any points for this. This is going to be an all or nothing type of thing. So it's time to start getting these things right so that we are having a good learning session. There are some things that were written in the notes that I can appreciate, and some of them that I don't appreciate. If you put in there, I really enjoyed watching this video and it really was exciting or really cool, that is nice for me to know, but if your entire notes consist of things like that, that isn't helpful to you or to me. If you save your file as something insulting to me, like ugh or biology is boring, I find that insulting, and I'm not sure why anybody would think that's the proper thing to do. So please don't do that again. Label your file as something that makes sense. If you want to put biology notes number 1, biology notes 927, whatever it is you need to name it, just don't name it something that's insulting to me. It's probably not a good idea to insult the person that you're asking for a grade from. So in thinking about why we would do this, in me giving you instructions, if you're going to go into some kind of future career and maybe you don't feel that at this point, or you haven't ever taken a job seriously at this point, but I'm sure that anybody who has had a job in the past will tell you that if you were to turn in projects to your boss that were labeled as insulting things to your boss, or if you just gave it some kind of half-hearted, incomplete job, that wasn't giving your boss what they had asked for, you're not going to be very successful in life. So if this is my little rant about being successful in life, please take this seriously. I know that a lot of you do things in order to make your notes appear to be longer. Changing the font so that it's 16, I know what that is. Putting in fluff or adding in commentary, things that in no way would help you to study for this class. Copy and pasting straight from the PowerPoint or straight from your neighbor's notes and then changing around so it's a different font so that it doesn't look the same. Just writing exactly what's in the PowerPoint, note for note, sharing notes with friends, or complaining about your work within your notes. I do read them, and I do read those things like, I already know this junk, or this is boring, or I hate biology, or I hate you, you suck. Those are all actual examples of things that were written in the notes on Thursday. So that is fine if you'd like to have that commentary, but you don't have to tell me. That's kind of, if nobody ever told you that that's dumb to do, that's dumb to do. So keep in mind that it may not apply to you, and some of us laugh, but if nobody's ever told you this before, then don't tell somebody they suck. Especially not your boss or your instructor, even if you do think that. So in part of what I was looking for as far as the themes of the video that we talked about this last week, the first part of it I thought you would find interesting because it's a 3D simulation of what is actually happening inside of every single one of your cells in your body. Sometimes it's hard to picture what those things are just from pictures or just from reading about them or hearing me talk about them. But some of these video simulations that they have on YouTube are really fascinating. So if you're looking to understand a subject more clearly, even I do this up until this point. If I want to understand transcription and translation, search for it on YouTube and watch a couple of videos about it, and you'll start to see that there are some really good videos on YouTube about how this stuff actually works. And sometimes picturing how it works is just better than reading it or seeing pictures of it. The second video that you watched last week I thought was kind of a good foray into the human mind. There is actually a human aspect to science, and that's that scientists don't always do the right thing. I think that when you watch this video that you saw, there were a lot of themes that we see not just in science but in society as a whole. We saw things like discrimination, things like sexism. A lot of you were really bothered by the use of the term playing God, or by them saying things about religion, which is their point, that they do some things that are provocative. And that sometimes people make judgments where they really have no right to make a judgment like that. We see scientists making predictions about what they think is going to happen, and then sometimes through just constant fiddling and messing around with the data and with those photographs that you saw them taking, they were able to actually figure out what the structure was of DNA before they ever could have actually seen DNA. You see that they do plenty of backstabbing. They do things that are unethical. Watson and Crick talked a little bit about making the atomic bomb and how he had wished that it wouldn't work, and then he was kind of upset when he found out that it did, because imagine that you had spent your whole career studying life, and then all of a sudden you were responsible for taking all of these lives. So we saw just from this one video that these things connect to every part of our life. These things that are happening inside of our bodies, these things that are happening with diseases, trying to find the cure for things, trying to make predictions, and then ultimately making things that can destroy all of life. These things are connected to us, and these are things that we should have strong feelings about. And this is something that I think is really fascinating about biology, because it does have such a human connection to it. So that was kind of part of what I was looking for as far as your notes went, and I got some really, really great insight into some of your thoughts about science, and I did appreciate everybody who made it personal. I think that's the really cool thing about getting to work with students, is that I get to see such a wide array of viewpoints. So thank you very much to those of you who put in some effort. For those of you that are having problems and you're not sure what to write about in the first place, or that you're finding you're having trouble sitting here in this lecture and you're not sure what to take notes about, or you're not sure how exactly to take notes, I actually uploaded this link into the content section of our Springboard. You can choose to watch it or choose not to watch it, but for those of you that are looking to take better notes, this is actually an entire class taught about how to take better notes, how to take notes you can study from for the tests, and basically how not to waste your time when you're taking notes. So you can get that through Springboard. Yes, sir?
How do you know how well you did on your notes?
I usually put in some feedback. If it was up to par, I put in a 10. If you're missing only one tiny thing, it was a 9 or a 7. If it was missing most of what it needed, I gave you half credit. And then if it didn't have anything at all to do with what I needed, then it was a 0. So I can put up a rubric if you want to see how to completely fill out the notes section. That's fine. Generally, I could tell if I looked at the notes and there was only one page and 3/4 of it was the instructions, that there's going to be a problem with it. But we can always sit down and look at it again if that's something that you want to come in when I'm in my office, or if you want to make an appointment, or if you want to look at that, we can definitely do that. I just want to make sure that everybody knows coming up here on October 11th is going to be your second exam. So if you don't have that on your calendar, make sure you're putting it on your calendar. If you're getting together with your friends to have study groups, that's definitely a great way to prepare for taking this exam. Make sure that you've read up to date. Make sure you go back and look at your notes, and that you're including things from the book. We do have that e-tutoring service that's available through the library. So if you want to ask questions in like a discussion forum, they have that available. They have biology tutors that are available at all times that can help you out with that. And I also want you to realize that with that new policy about withdrawing from class, that the last day to withdraw from classes is Sunday the 14th. So if you're thinking about withdrawing from this or from any of your classes, you can only do it from 2 classes within your first, I think it's 36 hours of classes. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind, and that you know that I'll be grading those exams, and you'll be able to look at how well you did and see whether or not you can still pass the class. Yes?
So on days we have exams, we will not have like video notes?
Right. Yes.
And so since the exam is next Thursday,
Correct.
what will we be going over next Tuesday?
It will be...
It says on there's chapter 7, not until the week after this.
That is correct. So we will be finishing up Chapter 6 and probably looking at whatever questions you have for a test review, for a study guide. Yes, anyone else? I think it will probably be on the Tuesday again. It's going to have to be at least, it'll at least be by then. I'll try and get it up a little bit sooner, but I can't. I mean, it won't be the night before the exam. Yes. Oh. Yes.
The assignment from the 27th, Ellen Springboard is due like October 7th or something crazy. Is that really when it's due?
No, that wasn't when it was due. It was due on Sunday.
I thought it was, but then I don't know.
Yeah, they're always due on the Sunday night after the Thursday.
Okay,
So
I don't want to
yeah, and so if you missed one of them, don't worry about it. I'll drop the lowest grade, so it won't affect your grade at all. Yes. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on, but if you have more questions, I'll stick around after class and we can talk about that a little bit further. So what we have been talking about the last time is a little bit about chromosomes and what they are, and how our DNA makes up genes, and how we have this genetic code that this is this blueprint for all of life. And so then we don't just look at the genetic code as being what makes up humans, but what makes up everything, all of our fruits, all of our vegetables, all the things that we eat, and all of the things out there that are alive. We have this variation that is all around us because of mutation. So generally when we think of mutations, we do think of like the six-legged frog, and we think of something being hideously deformed. But mutations are actually just going to be little simple alterations to the A's and T's and G's and C's in our DNA that is then going to cause little changes, or sometimes big changes, in our DNA, which codes for our proteins, which then codes for making life. So if we have these little functional changes to our DNA, changing the structure or changing the function of what the proteins are that are produced, we can have a wide range of effects. Going from horrible disfigurement or mutations that lead to death, all the way up to just the little changes that make us have lots of different types of apples, or lots of different types of trees, or lots of different types of fish. So in looking at those things, we use biotechnology. Biotechnology has this potential to improve our human health out there. How can we change DNA? How can we manipulate DNA in order to get these outcomes that would be beneficial to humans? So not just looking at things that have already changed and gone wrong, but looking at how we could change them going forward in order to make them better. So what exactly is biotechnology? Biotechnology is also dubbed genetic engineering, and this can mean that we add or subtract, add or delete, or transplant genes from one organism to another in order to alter the organism in a useful way. So a good example of this would be, I've been diabetic for 27 years. And it used to be that when I first was diagnosed with diabetes, I used to take insulin that came from ground up pig pancreas. So they used to go to the slaughterhouse and they would take the bacon and the ham out of the pigs, and then they would also take the pancreas out of the pigs, and they would grind it up to get the insulin out of it, and they would purify it, and that's what we would take in order to be able to survive. So pig insulin was close enough to human insulin that we were able to take it without anti-rejection drugs or anything like that. So over the years, as they started to improve that technology, what they actually found is that they could integrate human DNA into bacterial DNA, that ring of DNA that's inside of bacteria, and they were able to genetically enhance this bacteria to produce human insulin. And so these bacteria, instead of infecting people, would produce human insulin, which they could then purify and give to diabetics. And it's still done up until this day. So the reason I am alive is because of genetic engineering. And so this has happened way more times than I think that we can even fathom. Biotechnology can advance human health in three different categories of ways. We can either produce medicines to treat diseases, like what I talked about with making insulin. We can try to genetically engineer these diseases so that we can actually cure them and not get them in the future. Or we can try and prevent these diseases from ever occurring in the first place. So we produce the medicine, we cure the disease, or we cause it never to happen in the first place. Those are the three different ways we can use biotechnology. I'll give you just a second because I can see you're all still writing. Okay, so I'll post this right after class if you missed any of this. What's interesting here is that we're looking at just from our food supply, we have an enormous amount of genetic engineering. You can see that we have different colors and different textures and different flavors of vegetables and fruits, things that we eat. We've been able to genetically alter our food sources out there, like our chickens and our pigs and our cows, in order to get more milk or get more meat from them. We've actually genetically engineered our grapes to get better wine. We've seen genetic engineering a lot happening in things like corn and soybeans, helping to produce these big crops to help feed starving people in different countries, or to make our crops more insect resistant or more drought resistant, so that they can be hardier. We've had a lot of different manipulations of things like the flu vaccine in order to not get sick from the flu, in order to vaccinate our children from lots of different diseases. And then in order to make bigger and better food, better cures for diseases, and better things in order to feel better. So there's lots of different ways we genetically engineer things. So it is not a law here in the United States yet that everything that is genetically engineered be labeled. In the European Union, every genetically modified food is required to be labeled, because in Europe they are much more fearful of genetically modified organisms used for foods than we are here in the United States. Almost all of our corn, almost all of our soybeans, almost all of our cotton, and here you can see the percentages. Corn, 45% that are genetically modified. Our cotton, 76%. So in order to get bigger tufts of cotton that are stronger, that help to make better garments for us, cotton that travels better, that is more resistant to disease, that is resistant to drought. So lots of our cotton, and then 85% of our soybeans. And soybeans aren't one of those items that are just eaten usually as just the soybeans. It's ground up and put into our meats. It's used as a filler. It's used for a lot of our different food products out there. If you read the labels on a lot of your different like granola bars and things like that, you'll find out that they actually have soybeans in them. Soy is used in so much of our food, and if you look here, we've got 85% of it being genetically modified. So then we have to think about, so we've just recently begun genetically modifying things. What is going to be the outcome of those genetically modified things? So cotton, that one doesn't seem too innocuous. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that bad for us, because we're not eating the cotton and putting it into our bodies. But the corn and the soybeans, that's making it into all of our food supply. And so since nobody has studied what happens to these genetically modified foods in the long run to humans, then we can't exactly tell what effect this is going to have on us eventually. For those of you that watch late night television, you might see those commercials where people want to sue because of asbestos, and asbestos led to mesothelioma. I can't even say it. Mesothelioma. So they didn't know back when they were putting asbestos into everything that it was going to end up causing cancer. And so since we don't know what is going to come from genetically modifying everything that we put into our body, are these things going to cause cancer? Are they going to cause us to live longer, better lives? Or are they going to cause us to live shorter, much unhealthier lives? Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're updated. I won't ask you about the percentages. So yes, they have been updated. Do you have what they are?
Yeah, 86, 93, and 93.
So that means that almost everything is genetically modified these days. And to think that that happened in 2 years since the book was published, that's an unbelievable amount of genetic modification. So somebody out here, out there, is making a lot of money off of this stuff and is getting into our everyday food source. So what's going to happen to us 30 years from now? We're already starting to see things like it was put out there at one point that we're using so many hormones in our chicken in order to have them grow larger breasts so that we can sell that for more money and we can get more breast per pound of chicken. That hormone was causing women to develop abnormally large breasts and causing teenage girls to go through puberty earlier. So our foods have an effect on our everyday life, and it's going to have an effect on our future. It's definitely something to not only be, I wouldn't say be fearful of, but be aware of and know what's happening. For those people that choose organic foods, you're not going to find genetic modification in them. But genetic modification is not something that we can always control. Sometimes those genetically engineered plants get out and they spread without us being able to control them, and that's something that we couldn't have predicted. There are other plants that we're starting to genetically engineer so they can be insect resistant. So used to be a problem was that the caterpillars would come in and they would eat all of the crops, and that was a problem for farmers. So they used to spray it with all of these pesticides and all of these chemicals in order to kill insects. And so when you find out that all of these death-causing pesticides have been poured onto your food, then people start to say, well, I don't know if I want all those pesticides in my food. So then scientists went about genetically engineering our food sources so that they could put bacteria or put different insect resistance, modify the very DNA of our food so that insects, if they started eating it, would die. And so if they then do that, then they don't have to spray our food with pesticides, but if they're causing something to die from that insect eating it, you should start to wonder whether or not you want to eat that or not. I think that's definitely something you should be aware of. So these genetically modified plants lead to reduced pesticide use by farmers. One of the ways that that was done we'll be talking about coming up here in the lab, talking about DDT, and that they used to spray down all of our, even spray down people with DDT in order to cause them not to get lice or not to have insects on their bodies when they were out working in the fields. So people used to think that this was so advanced that it wouldn't be able to do any harm to us as humans. But when we change our food source, that then changes who we are. So we need to be thinking about what happens when we add chemicals to our food and what happens if we then change the DNA of our food. Here is a picture of something we used to see all the time. We used to see these crop planes going around and crop dusting and putting these herbicides and these pesticides all over our food. And now instead of spraying them down with chemicals, we're just changing their DNA a little in order to make it so that the weeds don't come in and take over the area, or the insects don't come in and take over the area. But we're starting to see that we can't control that so much. So if we grow some kind of superfood that will compete with the weeds out there, if that gets out and then we have no way to kill it because it's resistant, then we may end up having these strains of food or strains of weeds that can then get out on their own that we aren't able to control. We have to wonder about what the effects of that is going to be in the future. This is interesting. We have actually found ways to genetically engineer our food so that it grows faster, so that it grows a bigger body, because if you spend the same amount of time growing a little lightweight fish that you could spend growing bigger fish, feeding them less food, that then you can sell for more money, a lot of people are going to take that money-making revenue source rather than thinking about our health, rather than thinking about what these types of foods can do to us. So that's definitely something that you should keep in mind as you start to hear about our food changing. This is something that it looks kind of funny at the onset. They have actually genetically engineered chickens not to grow feathers, because if you think about it, if the chicken isn't growing feathers, then there's no need to pluck it before you kill it so we can eat it. So that cuts a step out of the process, and that makes the farmers more money. But what happens to these chickens? Because they are outside, they are at risk of getting cancer. So how do you know they take the cancer-filled chickens out of the food source? Or how do you know they've identified which chickens are going to get which disease, which chickens actually get cancer, because that may be something that we as consumers are not capable of identifying. What happens to these chickens when they get infested with insects? They have no feathers to fight off insect bites, or if they get surrounded by mosquitoes, there's no way for them to fight those mosquitoes off. So as the mosquitoes go in and bite our food, they're putting the mosquito toxins into our food, which could spread around disease, things like West Nile virus. Even there has been talk about mosquitoes being able to spread HIV and AIDS. And so we may find that out at some point in the future. So is this a good idea? Is it a good idea to genetically modify our food so that it's basically Frankenfood? That's what they call it in Europe. So we found that some of the reasons that they do this sound like they're not so harmful. So imagine if you were a watermelon farmer and you are growing genetically engineered and modified watermelons that are square. If you put these watermelons into a box in order to ship them across the country, if they're already square, then they're not going to bounce around, they're not going to get so many bruises. You might genetically engineer them so that they taste better, they're sweeter, they have no seeds. There's lots of things that we can do that don't sound like they're going to cause a problem for us. The one of the tomatoes, I think, is really interesting because one of the big problems that they have in shipping tomatoes long distances is that the tomatoes at the bottom of the boxes get squashed down as the truck is going over bumps. So if you genetically modify your tomato to be square, fits in the box nice and perfect, and you get better ketchup, better tasting ketchup that doesn't have the bruises in the fruit like that. But what happens to us 30 years after we eat genetically modified tomatoes? Because a lot of this genetic modification comes from inserting bacterial genes into the genes of our food. So just like they're making insulin for me that's coming from bacteria, being generated by bacteria, that's keeping me alive now, so that's definitely a bonus. But what's going to happen to me in 30 years after having all of that bacterial-created insulin inside of my body? So people are starting to ask these questions, and I think they're important questions to ask. The one of the carrots was interesting because they did this genetic modification to make carrots purple because it used to be that all carrots were purple. Until somebody started to find these orange carrots, thought they tasted better, started to grow lots of orange carrots. And so at Texas A&M, they said, oh, the carrots used to be this purple color. let's see if we can reactivate that gene. And so they made the carrots basically to be their school colors. And so that sounds like it's fun, but what happens if that modification does some real harm to us? This is what people are questioning. Is our food going to eventually make us turn into zombies or make us turn into, having Franken food? Does it make us become Franken humans? So here are the 3 general fears about our food. The fear number 1 is that organisms that we may want to kill may become invincible. So as we are starting to make our food weed resistant, as we're starting to make it insect resistant, are we eventually going to breed foods that will get out there in nature and start to multiply and come to the point where we may want to kill it, but it can't be killed because it's so resistant? Or if it breeds with something else out there, what if we make mosquitoes that are completely resistant to being killed? What if they're resistant to all insecticides? What if we make it so that there's some kind of plant that grows out of control and we can't kill it off and it overtakes the earth? I mean, these things don't seem like they're going to happen right now, but these are questions about what if. What if they do happen? What if we have organisms that we don't want to kill that may be killed off by these crops? So what if our food or our food supply gets taken over and we can't stop the takeover of our food supply? And the third fear is that they are not tested or regulated adequately. We don't know when our food is genetically modified. Corn is in so much of our food these days. And so you can get into some of the conspiracy theories that are on the internet, and definitely you can make yourself crazy and believe that you might not want to ever eat the regular food from Giant Eagle ever again. You may want to go completely organic because you want your food to be natural. But in some ways, we can't really tell what has been genetically modified and what hasn't. So then getting into the biotechnology with animals, one of the big crowning achievements of the 20th century was being able to clone different types of plants, clone different types of animals. And hopefully you've all heard of Dolly the sheep before, which was one of the first successfully cloned organisms. And some of you may be looking at that for your lab topic. You might be talking about the cloning of animals or the cloning of humans. And so in order to do that, one of the first things that we needed to figure out was what is involved in the human genome. So mapping the human genome was actually this huge project that was completed in the year 2000. And what they found was that there were 3 billion nucleotide base pairs in the human genome. So 3 billion of those A's and T's and G's and C's are what makes you into a human, and that maps the human genome. So this was something that went really slowly at first, and then as technology got better, they were able to make this happen much, much faster. It took a lot of computer power. It took many, many years in order to get this done. But then once they mapped the genome of humans, they can move on to mapping the genome of lots of different organisms. And so when they were able to do that, we were actually able to look at how closely we are related to other things that are out there. And so we were able to build up what's called a phylogenetic tree. And a phylogenetic tree is basically showing the similarities and differences in those DNA base pairs between us and every other organism that's out there. So just like we talked about how many base pairs make up an onion, how many make up an amoeba, how much DNA does it take to create a human or create a newt or a fungus, we were actually able to see how many things we had in, how many DNA base pairs we had in common with the other living things that are out there. And that helps to trace our evolutionary past, how things changed over time with these mutations between the A's and the T's and the G's and the C's. Because really the different species out there are just a result of the ancestors having their DNA mutate, and then some being able to adapt and survive, and then some mutations being bad and the species not being able to survive. So looking at our evolutionary past, it's not just we go out and look for dinosaur bones anymore. It's that we can actually look at the ancestry through DNA, looking at the physical structure, so what do organisms have in common, and then also looking at the embryological development, so what does the embryo look like as it grows inside of all the different eggs that are out there. So think about all the organisms you know that have eggs, I mean like frogs and fish and you know, the human egg as it develops inside of the mother. There are similarities in these embryos that help to show us what our past was. So when we say that humans and chimps are genetically 96% identical, what exactly do we mean by that? That doesn't mean that we are exactly like a chimp. It doesn't mean that one day a chimp had a human baby and that's how we got humans. This is really just talking about how many base pairs we have in common with the chimps that we could trace back millions and millions and millions of years. So what we're going to see happen at some point as we're finding out what these DNA base pairs, the 300 or the 3 billion base pairs, we can look at those things, and eventually we'll be able to clone not just an entire human, which some of us might consider to be unethical. As we had talked about, the secret of DNA talked about playing God. Is this something that will happen in the future? But they're already starting to do things like cloning organs. Imagine if the future cures for diabetes are going to be that they'll take my stem cells and they'll grow me a new pancreas that has all the markers of me, and they'll be able to implant it in me, and then poof, my diabetes goes away. I don't have to take anti-rejection drugs because it's technically me. What if we find this fountain of youth where we can take stem cells and make people be young forever? And then what eventually happens if we have the cloning of a human being? We have to talk then not just about is it right or wrong to do that? Is it ethical to do that? Because we have seen so many problems with cloning, namely the death of the clones much earlier than is normal. So human cloning is actually closer than we think. We've had several people that have claimed that they have done it in different laboratories around the world. Nobody has proved that they have cloned a human yet, but I personally believe somebody has already done it. I don't think that some scientists who don't actually care about the ethics of it, I'm sure they have cloned a human. But you know, it'll come out here probably in the next 10 years that somebody has actually done it. So then do we make laws about not cloning humans? What if we have people that are doing it for evil reasons, trying to build an ultimate human or trying to play God? That's definitely a question. Or what if we find the Time Magazine article was that let's say a couple were having trouble getting pregnant, and they were to then clone the mother, start those cells dividing, and put that clone inside of her womb and allow her to grow a mini human, a mini exact replica. Is that something that might be possible in the future? And so as we see in vitro fertilization occurring, as we start to see stem cells becoming more popular and as the cure for diseases, we're going to start to see some pretty scary stuff that I think will bother you. What's kind of scary about cloning is that actually it's a really simple process. So in 1997, the first scientist to clone an animal, he cloned a sheep, and he called the sheep Dolly. And so here's how he did it. In step one, you can see that he isolates an egg cell from one sheep and then a mammary cell from another sheep. And he takes and he pulls the nucleus out of that egg cell. So then he takes and fuses the two cells together and includes the nucleus. So that we've got the nucleus of this mammary cell that then he sets off with a spark and he initiates cell division. So starts this cell in this process of dividing. That's what happens when a sperm and an egg join together. They start going through cell division, and as it divides and multiplies, it grows up into the fetus and the embryo and the baby. So here they just skipped the process of having the sperm and egg meet, and they took a mammary cell, fused it with an egg cell, sent a spark of electricity through it, started it dividing, and as it divided, it started to grow into this embryo. And so then they took and they implanted this dividing embryo into a surrogate mother, a surrogate sheep. And when the surrogate mother gave birth, she gave birth to a cloned sheep. So imagine that you can go from one cell, a cloned cell, all the way up to an embryo in these 6 easy steps. Now, what they found about cloning was that it was not as easy as this oversimplified version. They found that in some species, it didn't work like this. They were able to clone things like sheep and like frogs, but they weren't able to clone like pigs and certain types of birds. So why does cloning work in some species but not work so well in others? Like I said, you probably heard about there was a woman out there that wanted to clone her dead cat. So she took in her dead cat and paid an extraordinary amount of money. And she found that a scientist in a lab that was willing to do it. So they took the cells from the dead cat and they started them dividing, implanted it into a surrogate. The surrogate gives birth to an exact clone, the exact DNA of this dead cat. And one of the things that was surprising about it is the cat didn't look anything like her cat. And that's because we may find that exact replicas of DNA when cats have litters of kittens, they don't all look exactly alike. The patterns on them aren't exactly alike. So the patterns on this cloned cat were not like the patterns of her dead cat. They found that it didn't act anything like the cat. So this gets into questions of how much of who we are is nature and how much of who we are is nurture. So in cloning organisms, we definitely need to think about, so yes, this is an exact DNA copy, but it hasn't gone through the same experiences that we've gone through. So at this point, we may ask ourselves, is it ethical to clone somebody's dead cat? You may have strong feelings one way or another, or you may just think, hey, that's cool that they're able to do it. But medical justifications for cloning, I think this is the direction that a lot of scientists are going to go in, is that they'll find that some cloned animals may actually be able to produce human medicines or be able to produce human organs. So I'm not sure if I put this slide in here, but you can actually Google it. There's a scientist that was able to grow a human ear on the back of a lab rat. So it was a lab rat that had a human ear growing out of the back of it. It's kind of a cool picture to Google. Let me see if I didn't put it in there. But that's definitely something for you to look at. If we're able to then clone human organs, what might happen in the future for our armed forces out there? What if somebody loses a leg in combat and we're able to then grow them another leg? Or what if somebody like me needs a pancreas? They grow me my own pancreas. What happens if they find ways to genetically enhance our brains and then do a brain transplant? Is that changing who the person is? Is it changing in depth? Is it changing their soul? How do we know what a soul is? There are definitely things to think about as the science advances. One of the things that that's kind of the talk of science fiction was the movie Jurassic Park, where they found the dinosaur DNA inside of the fossilized amber, and they were then able to recreate dinosaurs. That was actually not exactly how it would have worked, because as the DNA of the dinosaurs would have been fossilized, it would have been turned into stone. There would have been no way to find usable DNA from that fossilized, crystallized amber. And so just because they are not going to be able to do it that way doesn't mean scientists haven't found another way. They have actually found that dinosaurs and birds are very closely genetically related, and that some of the dinosaur genes are still found inside of birds today. And so if those genes had been turned off millions and millions of years ago, maybe they can turn those genes back on. And so one of the things that they're looking at doing is taking a chicken, and chickens still have some ancient DNA inside of them. If they turn that on, they can make chickens that have razor-sharp teeth. They can make chickens that have dinosaur tails. So at some point, we may be able to clone dinosaurs by finding that DNA that's been turned off and turning it back on. One of the amazing things that they've been able to find is that dinosaurs don't exactly look like the way that we used to picture them looking. We found a lot more dinosaurs that have feathers, and that shows the relation between dinosaurs and birds. And so this is something that is exciting. It's actually something that's worked on here at the University of Akron. One of the members of the biology department studies prehistoric feathers, and he's actually found that there was a dinosaur that was about the size of a chicken that had this grayish colored body and then black and white wings and red plumage on the back of it. So that's something that's revolutionary that's coming out of the university. So this is another interesting video to watch. This is about a scientist who is trying to build these dinosaur chickens, and it's kind of fascinating to see how they do that. So then we start to get into chapter 6. I think that's where I'm gonna end off for today. So if you have questions, we'll talk about this more. Remember, we only have Thursday and next Tuesday before our exam, so make sure that you're reading up on that stuff. And so we'll end there.